The first 2D transformation that we're going to look at is going to be scale. The scale value works in the way that you would anticipate it to work. It allows you to increase or decrease the size of an element. I'll go ahead and I'll create an element to use in our example. I'm simply going to make a div with a class of box, and I'll actually duplicate that and make another div with a class of box and a class of box2. In my style section, I'm going to make some rules for the box elements, and we'll set the background color. I'll round the corners slightly and specify the width and the height. I'll also set a margin all the way around of 50 pixels. If we look at our page in the browser, you can see that I have 2 box elements. Now if I want to apply the transform property, I'll target our box 2 so we can compare. And all you need to do is use the transform property, and then we're going to specify that we want to scale. And when you put the scale value in parentheses, you put the amount of scaling. So for instance, if I put 2, it's going to scale this item up to be twice its original size. If I save and we look in the browser, you can see now that the second square is twice as big as the first square. Now it is worth noting that when we apply scale, you can see how it did not scale the margin. It only scaled the size of the box. It's scaling the width and the height properties. It also is possible to scale the different axes independently, and we can do that by passing in 2 values into the parentheses. So here, if I specified that I wanted to scale 2 for the width and 0.5 for the height, and we save, you can now see that the box 2 is twice as wide as the original box, but also half the dimension. You can use decimal values if you want to decrease the size of the original. So again, if I just passed in 0.5, my second box is going to be half the size of the original box. It is worth noting that when you pass in more than one value into the parentheses, it's always going to use width first and then height. If we want to scale the item equally, then we just pass in the one value. Now, if we want to create some sort of animation on the box, let's look at how we can use the transform property to do that. Any sort of transform can be triggered when an element changes states, such as a hover or a click. In my example, I'm going to be using hover. I'm going to get rid of my box 2, so I just have one box, and I'll change this second selector to be .box:hover. We want our transition to occur on the hover event, and I'm just going to have the box double in size, so I'll pass 2 into the parentheses. Now because I want the scale to occur on the hover event, if I just leave this as is, you can see that the box just jumps and doubles in size. And let's add a little bit more margin since we only have one box, which will give us a little bit more space. So when I hover over, it jumps and it changes sizes. If we want to have that nice smooth transition, then we need to add the transition. Without applying the transition, the element simply abruptly changes sizes. We need to add the transition to the parent selector, not to the hover selector, and that's going to make the transition be smooth on both the hover over and the hover off. So I'll come into my box element and I'm just going to apply transition. And here we're going to say that we want to transition the transform property, and we want it to happen over 1.5 seconds. I'll save, and now if we refresh, you can see that the box is going to smoothly transition when I hover over and then mouse away. There's all sorts of creative possibilities that you can add by using the transform property and scaling elements up or down.